Jeremy, prior to Princeton, did you attend public or private school?
Before attending Princeton, I went to a private all-boys Catholic high school in El Paso, Texas.
Okay. And how did you prepare both socially and intellectually for Princeton?
I didn't. I did not prepare socially, intellectually, emotionally, politically, or any other way for Princeton. It was kind of a um, my psychology teacher, Mr. Dineza, asked me where I was applying, and I told him the schools, and he goes, "You should apply to Princeton. I think you do well there." And he had gone to Princeton, and I didn't know too much about it, and so I applied, and they said yes. But I really didn't prepare so much explicitly for Princeton. It just kind of happened.
Okay.
Would you like to include his name and stuff?
Oh, yeah. We can, to begin, we should have. Can you say your name and class year and then spell it in that order?
Okay. My name is Jeremy Borjon, undergraduate class of 2010, graduate class of 2017. My name is spelled Jeremy, B as in boy, Orjon.
And if you could do one more take, because I think your eyes looked at this camera.
Oh.
Did take? Yeah.
Okay, from the again.
Okay.
My name is Jeremy Borjon, undergraduate class of 2010, graduate class of 2017. And you spell my name Jeremy, B as in boy, Orjon.
Thanks.
I'm gonna tell him that we could get them.
Okay. Okay. Why did you go to Princeton?
They said yes. I went to Princeton because they said yes. They accepted me. I didn't anticipate coming here. So when I was in high school, I used to be captain of the debate team, and I was actually number 3 in the class academically. So my college list was your pretty standard type for that: Harvard, Princeton, Yale, etc. I didn't apply to the local school at the University of Texas at El Paso, and I remember having a brief moment of panic right before you were supposed to find out where we got in. Like I didn't apply to the local school, which would have been a slam dunk. Like what if everyone says no and I have to skip a year? Then I was actually admitted to Duke, and I was there, doing the visit when my mom called me and was like, "You got into Princeton," and all of the Duke hosts were like, "Damn it." And the financial aid package was very good. It wasn't the best of the ones I got, but it was good enough that my mom was like, I can't tell you not to go to Princeton. Like we'll figure this out, we'll make it work. And then after my first year, Princeton really upped the financial aid, and so it was an incredible deal.
What were your expectations coming into Princeton, and did Princeton live up to them?
I've never had too many, as an undergraduate, I didn't have many expectations from Princeton. I'm the first in my family to graduate from college, and the first in my immediate family to graduate from college, and the first in my entire family to get a PhD. And as an undergraduate, I was just going to college. I was going to Princeton. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, what would happen. I just kind of went with the flow, and later on, like I didn't realize the magnitude of the things that were happening to me until after I had left Princeton. And even now I still kind of realize the opportunities I exploited and succeeded in, and the opportunities I missed. And just that I didn't have an idea going in. And now as a graduate student, that's a very different story. As a graduate student, I knew I chose to come back to Princeton because I was very interested in the topic of research I was going to do. I was, as an undergraduate, I majored in psychology and neuroscience, and my senior thesis advisor, Asif Ghazenfar, who's going to be the head of the new Yale College, he invited me to come back to Princeton and do a PhD with him and study, he was bringing in a colony of marmoset monkeys from Brazil to study how they vocalize, how they learn, how they grow up, and how the brain systems underlying vocal production in these monkeys. And this was a very ambitious project. It was very exciting. No one else in the nation had been doing this marmoset work at the time. And so I decided to come back. And with that, the expectations for Princeton were very different. They were very professional, very career-driven, education-driven. Do research, publish papers, gain an academic network, and go on the path to be a successful scientist.
Did you feel that you fit in when you arrived at Princeton?
When I arrived at Princeton, I didn't necessarily felt like I didn't fit in, but I also didn't necessarily feel like I fit in. I made reasonable friends with the kids in my hallway. I lucked out in that the majority of them were from low-income backgrounds, and they were first-generation students, and the ones who weren't were actually very pleasant to be around, and were good friends. But as time went on, I found that those people found their social circles, and I kind of kept just being by myself, basically. I found a small group of friends who were actually all mostly international, but all loved heavy metal. And we were the heavy metal kids, and that's who I hung out with for the most part.
And in your major, you can repeat it, I know you already said it, but were there many other Latino kids in that major?
So my major was psychology and neuroscience. I remember several minorities, but I'm not sure if they were Latino.
Okay. And did you take any courses that touched on Latino-related issues?
Yes, I took Latino Politics, Politics 333 by Professor David Avalos, and that was a fantastic course where basically he kind of said everything that I had been experiencing, which is that the goal of a liberal arts education is to disorient you and then reorient you. And that's exactly what Princeton was doing. I was entering this new realm with new people from different backgrounds. I was completely disoriented. And over time, I slowly became more and more reoriented and had a bigger perspective of the world around me and what it was to be, like the silly motto they have, in the nation's service and in the service of all nations and in the service of humanity or something. They added, the Sotomayor, they added something because of her to it, but I forgot what it was.
Jeremy, what motivated you to take the academic direction that you did?
I loved it. So I decided to pursue psychology and neuroscience because, since I was captain of the debate team, everyone was like, Jeremy, you're going to go into politics. You're going to go into law school and you're going to be a successful lawyer, successful politician. And I was about 2 weeks away from taking the LSAT. And I remember being on the phone with my mom for like 3 hours walking around campus. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to take the LSAT. I don't want to be paid $500 an hour to fill out forms. This sounds mind-numbing. And I floated to her that I kind of wanted to be a scientist because I was taking a course, Fundamentals of Neuroscience, with Professor Michael Graziano. And at the time, he looked like Hagrid from Harry Potter. Jolly big guy with a beard, amazingly brilliant man who would just go to the front of a lecture hall, look at his notes from a manila envelope, put them back in, get a piece of chalk, and then he'd go off for an hour and a half drawing diagrams and sketching out things and explaining the brain. And the idea of studying the brain blew my mind. This is a 3-pound chunk of neural tissue and fat. After you die, within 60 seconds, it starts turning into a custard-like consistency. That is you. That creates your perceptions, that receives your experience. The environment shapes it shapes the environment, and it's this 3-pound chunk of neural tissue and fat. How could I say no to studying this? This sounded amazing. And so I talked to Graziano about being a researcher in his lab, and he works with monkeys. And he didn't take undergrads because of the monkey research is very difficult and very sensitive. Instead, he referred me to this individual, Bart Hobel, who's unfortunately passed away, but this guy was one of the original teams that discovered dopamine. He was that old, which is like a canonical neurotransmitter, and he studied food addiction. And so I learned how to do surgical implantations of cannulas, like little tubes in rat brains, and we put a corticotropin-releasing hormone, which is a hormone that basically triggers hunger. And I saw how that impacted their feeding behavior. My first experience with him was just This is where we do the surgeries, Jeremy. Little tiny closet, 2 graduate students with rats, on the table. They're doing their little surgery with their tiny little instruments. And then suddenly everything kind of started getting dim, and I fainted. I bashed my head on a door hinge and needed to go to the health center to get stitches. And through that, like, it was I crashed headfirst into science and into academia, and since then I haven't turned back. I jumped to other fields after Bart and worked with other professors in my undergraduate career, but like that's where I found my home, was with the academics.
And how would you characterize the intellectual atmosphere?
Fabulous. I mean, I ate it up. It was challenging because you had people who didn't have the same experiences I had.
Can you paraphrase that?
The intellectual atmosphere.
Yes, okay,
Intellectual
right. So the intellectual atmosphere at Princeton is fantastic. And it's fantastic, it's challenging, and it pushes you in ways you didn't anticipate because you encounter people who didn't have the same life experiences you did. And some of these people are sympathetic to your own experiences, and some of them are not. And being a debater, I loved talking to them, learning from them. It's this weird thing that I always hear from my friends, where it's like, oh well, Princeton doesn't feel like home, and I was like, well, yeah, dude, you're not home. This is Princeton University. Your home is where you came from. For me, home's El Paso, Texas. I never wanted to make Princeton my home. I ended up 9 years of my life here. I always kind of made that separation very clear up front, and the intellectual environment that Princeton facilitated was just changed me in many ways.
What was your thesis topic, and how did you find that experience?
Well, my thesis topic was a collaboration with 2 professors who tended not to work with each other. Asif Ghazenfar, who was the primary advisor who worked with monkeys, and Alexander Todorov, who was a professor who studied face perception and emotion perception. And I was in Alexander Todorov's class, and I was going to be a senior. I was ready to start figuring out what my senior thesis project was going to be. I was in Alexander Todorov's lab, and then taking Asif's class. Asif emailed me at the end of the class and goes, "Hey Jeremy, would you be interested in joining my lab? I think you'd be a great fit." And I thought I liked his class a lot. He was a great professor. He taught about the diversity of brains. We learned about star-nosed moles and how their brains have evolved to exploit the niche that they live in. Bats, and how echolocation represents itself in the brain and stuff like that. But I enjoyed working with Alexander Todorov, and so I had a meeting with the 2 of them, and we came up with an experiment. And the basic question was to look at, does sound perception, the basic experience of hearing things, can that be influenced by perceiving social information? And so we decided to look at eye gaze. So for example, where you're looking, what my senior thesis showed is where you're looking changes how I hear the location of sounds. So if I play a sound coming from this ear, and you're looking over there, I'll perceive that sound is coming from this ear. And it's a very subtle effect, but we were able to get it published like a year or 2 after I graduated. So then, the senior thesis, I had a blast.
What was your social life like at Princeton?
My social life was, it was small. I had my few very close friends who were all the heavy metal kids. And we would, go, and then my, I guess more satellite ancillary friends, and we'd go to their parties, for example. It was being surrounded by contrarians who didn't necessarily like Princeton, but they liked the intellectual component of Princeton, and, were also very, not afraid to criticize Princeton for the faults it had committed and such. So it was I guess, I was with the contrarians.
What types of groups did you participate in? Did you participate in any eating clubs or any clubs in general?
No.
Or
So I was not an official member of any of the eating clubs. Because I simply couldn't afford it. Even the cheapest club at the time, Quad, it was like $3,000 a semester or a year or something like that. And that was the cheapest. The most expensive, I believe, at the time was probably Ivy, and I think that was about 12 grand. It's nuts. And I remember talking to the people in Quad, and I was like, guys, I like you all are cool, I like hanging out with you, but if I had $3,000, I wouldn't spend it to spend more time with you. Like, I'd buy myself a nice new suit, I'd get an Xbox, like, there are so many other things. I would spend $3,000, I sent half of it back to my mom. I mean, it just didn't make sense for me to spend that money. I didn't want to find that money for an eating club. I was lucky in that I was dating a woman who was in one of the eating clubs, Colonial, and we had this nice meal exchange program where, like, we got lunch in the residential colleges and had dinner at Colonial, and you just, like, filled out this little ticket, and I could eat at the eating clubs pretty much every day. And so I met a lot of the people at Colonial, and I got the free experience of the eating clubs as much as I could.
Were your closest friends during your undergraduate years of similar background?
No.
Like you?
Well, yes and no. They were all, I would say they were all tended to be loners, and they all tended to be heavy metal heads.
Not forget the paraphrase.
Yeah. So my friends at Princeton, some of them did share my background, others didn't. And in particular, I had some friends who were international, from Pakistan, from Bulgaria. I had some Mexican American friends from California, and you know, my Bulgarian friend was like the daughter of professors. But you could never really tell because she was raised in Bulgaria and had like an amazingly level head for everything and was very easy to talk to. And same thing, and you know, my other friends, they, you know, some of them were first generation, others weren't, but they were all, I guess it sounds redundant, but they had the rocker attitude, I'm gonna figure out how to succeed for these 4 years here at Princeton, get what I can out of it, and then leave. And some of them, I don't see them back here at reunions very often. They're not terribly close to Princeton, but yeah, that was the undergraduate experience.
What do you think sets you apart from your friends during your undergraduate years that you are here at the reunion?
I feel like a lot of it for me, reunions is service. I want to, when I'm here, I'm with the Latino Alumni Association, and I am trying to make life easier for the current Latinos on campus. And it doesn't have to impact me immediately, but it's one of those where, last night, for example, with the Association of Princeton Graduate Alumni, we brought a electro cumbia DJ, El Dusty, from Corpus Christi, Texas, to perform. And opening for him was DJ Reka, who's a electro bhangra artist from New York. And closing the night was a rap hip hop DJ from Newark. And so you had this minority music that you never hear at reunions. You walk around reunions, all you hear is Jesse's Girl, Sweet Caroline, and all those other crap songs. And I mean, it's redundant, it gets old, and there's a thirst, a hunger for this sort of music, for this representation. And last night was just spectacular. Like the graduate tent last night ran out of all their alcohol early because of the bands. And the first DJ Reka, they were playing bhangra music, and like towards 3/4 of the way through, like at first it was a little empty, but then as time went on, more people were coming to the tent. Then like 3/4 into her set, this like girl comes up very shyly and like pokes her on the shoulder and whispers to her, and Reka goes, like nods. And then here comes, alumni who are dancing traditional bhangra on stage with DJ Reka. And it was a triumphant moment. Like, I'm not Indian. I have no blood of that culture or anything of that. But, making that happen just is why I come back to reunions.
Awesome. Were you involved in any specific clubs or any organizations that were Latino?
Tangentially. So I was good friends with the people in Chicano Caucus and Acción Latina. I know them all, they all know me, but I never really joined, full-blooded joined their groups. There was just a lot of, I found my friends, in my undergraduate years here, my friends were the graduate students in my lab. They were the academics. It was this ivory tower really took me, and the Latino groups on campus were fun distractions and fun opportunities to meet phenomenal people, but just didn't necessarily identify with them as much.
Okay. And were there any major external events during time you were at Princeton that affected your experience or affected the whole campus as a whole that you can remember?
So I didn't, let's see, so undergraduate was 2000, when I was an undergraduate, that was 2006 to 2010. Graduate school was 2012 to 2017. And external events that happened like nationwide, I'd be hard pressed to tell you. I don't really remember. Personally, yeah, family members died. There was, when I was a graduate student, we were targeted by PETA when I was working in an animal lab, and that was like a traumatic experience. And it's, so nationally, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Since I used to work in a monkey lab, we had an individual make a false accusation against our lab. And things got very scary very fast. We had people wandering the Neuroscience Institute looking for our lab. There was people calling and threatening us on our office phones. We had to basically cover up, it was rough. It was rough. Like the whole neuroscience building went under lock and key for that time.
Okay. How did Princeton affect your subsequent life and career?
It made it. Without Princeton, I don't think I'd be where I am. My career is, I'm an academic. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at Indiana University, Bloomington, and I am on the market to be a professor this fall. And my time as an undergraduate at Princeton opened up research opportunities for me that gave me phenomenal experiences, which opened up more opportunities for me, and doing a PhD at Princeton solidified those academic skills and gave me just an analytical tool set to use that is really open doors. So I guess it's if I were to have done I don't think I could have done the same research I did at Princeton anywhere else. The researchers here are top notch. The professors are incredible in the sciences. And they introduced me to a network of people, and they made my career.
Marsh, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I would just like to add one more question, because you actually had an extended stay at Princeton, being in your graduate program, and over time, I think the word unapologetic has become one of the key buzzwords to classify true authenticity. So I would ask you, in your experience at Princeton through the years, how have you seen it evolve that one could be unapologetically who they are? At that school, it speaks obviously specific to Latin culture, Latino culture, please.
So I would say that being unapologetically yourself at Princeton is incredibly difficult at the undergraduate level. When I was there were a lot of social games that were being played that you may or may not have been aware of, and you kind of had to figure out who you were and how you're going to present yourself to people. And some other students who had, boarding school and all these other things knew how to do the social games. Us first generation low-income kids didn't necessarily know how to do that. As a graduate student, though, I met a ton of people who were unapologetically themselves. These were people who showed up to lab in pajamas, did phenomenal research, published in high-impact journals.
Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that.
Yes.
We're actually recording.
Princeton. Yeah. I found that in graduate school it was much easier to find people who are unapologetically themselves. And I think that's because, at least in the PhD programs, academics kind of take this intellectual, you're an intellectual, you're an academic, you walk around, think deep thoughts, read books, and be an interesting person. And there's less judgment of what you look like, where you came from, who you are. It's just how do you think, and how can you make your arguments, and how can you advance the field. And I found that it was much easier for me to be myself as a graduate student than it was as an undergraduate. Because as an undergraduate, I felt like there were games that were happening that I wasn't aware of. And that were, if I could do again, I probably would handle some of the social situations a little bit better. But, you know, it's, for me, academia was unapologetically myself.
And just to close it out, what would Jeremy today tell young Jeremy back in the day?
Don't give the eating clubs a dime. I feel like I would, if I could tell myself anything from back in the day, it would be that you are around people who have been given things their entire lives and take things for granted, and they're not afraid to ask for what they want, and that they can literally ask for anything they want. And as a student on this campus, a lot of it's a choose your own adventure, and be bold in your choices, ask the hard questions. If you're not satisfied, pursue it further. Don't just accept what they tell you at first go. And also, you know, go talk to the professors at office hours. I never went actually as an undergraduate. You know, and don't be afraid to reach out and have this, you know, faculty member explain a concept to you again and again and again until you get it. Why? Because there's other people who are legacy kids here who will do that unapologetically, and who, you know, as a first generation low income student, we feel that we shouldn't rock the boat too much, and we shouldn't draw too much attention to ourselves necessarily, and that if we didn't get it the first time, it's just because we're dumb. But there are genuinely dumb people here who are very, very wealthy, and that's how they got in. And they will, you know, live your life as bold, like live your life as was it an unqualified white man who just got the promotion. Please don't put that one on.
Good. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
That was great.
Honey.